Welcome to the work session for Greeley-Evans School District 6. Today's the 13th day of February. We'll call the meeting to order. And Ms. Lemon, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Present.
President Nash. Present. Director Matthews.
Present.
Director Norwood.
Present.
Director Pappas. Present. Director Sullivan. Present. All board members present.
Thank you, Ms. Lemon. First up tonight, we want to just take a look at the calendar. What I've been looking at the calendar and make sure that there's nothing that we're missing on that calendar. We have a building visit to the Family Center on the 24th. Negotiations, remember, are the first week of March, and that's at the Ames Welcome Center. I'll let you read all the rest of that. We do have some dinners and events that we're attending, but mostly just our work sessions and board meetings. Anything else that's not on our calendar?
President Matthews, I'll just add that I think Ms. Lemon will be reaching out to board members about interviews prior to negotiations. I don't know if Diane plans to interview everyone, or maybe just Dr. Campos-Spitzy because she's new, but you'll be hearing. Oh, does she want everybody?
I think we already got a couple.
Oh, did you get invites already? Yeah. Okay, great. And the other thing, you will be receiving in our weekly memo, kind of a survey to fill out. We are planning to start doing board member spotlights and just give the community a chance to get to know each one of you a little bit more and share some information about each of you and kind of a get to know you this spring. So that'll be coming through eWeek, and the communications department will be working on that.
All right, thank you. Anything else, guys, on our calendar, or that needs to be on our calendar that's not on our calendar? All right, not hearing anything. So we'll move right along to our Council of Student Representatives at board meetings. And Dr. Belch, I'll give it to you to introduce this item.
Thank you, and I think Ms. Pappas will help as well probably, but after CASB and after the students had the opportunity to participate in CASB, the question has come up, and in some additional conversations that we've had with the leadership team of the Council of Student Representatives, the question has come up about possibly having their regular presence and even some participation at school board meetings. That they learned at CASB that in some school districts that students sit with the board in work sessions and in business meetings, and they're not voting members. They can't be voting members, but they are advisory. They're there to answer questions. They're there to ask questions that might arise. So we wanted to have a conversation tonight to see if you have an interest in pursuing that and having our council student reps be in attendance. I did talk with the young folks about this a little bit, and I think they understand that if there's a commitment to participate, that they would need to participate on a regular basis, maybe a quarter at a time, certainly a few meetings at a time because of the continuity of how things roll from one board meeting to the next. But I'm pretty excited about their interest and their eagerness to possibly participate. So with that, I'll open it up to Ms. Pappas to see what else she'd like to add as the representative from the board to the Council of Student Reps, and then we may want to ask the students to come up and assist also.
Thanks. I think it will be important to have Julie and Richard come up and speak to us as well. But I will tell you that when the idea first came up, it came from the student reps. All the leadership team met with us, and then Julie, the president, took the idea back to the Council of Student Reps at the last meeting, and they were very interested and also had some very insightful questions, thoughts about how this would work, what does it look like. And so we felt like it was important to come tonight and get input from the rest of you to make sure that you understand what this would be. And also, I think Julie and Richard probably have some additional thoughts from the other council members. So I think it'd be important to bring Julie and Richard up to the table and be able to have them give their perspective. And
We'll just bring another chair, and you guys can come take this mic over here. You kind of share it. Or there's a chair there. Welcome.
Thank you. Okay. So after the last meeting, we asked like who would be interested from our group, and everyone raised their hand, which like it's really great, and people want to learn about what the school board is doing, and so I think that would be a really great idea to have students like either at a quarters time or a few weeks to participate in that, and ask questions. And what our idea was to have a variety of students, so maybe like one from Central, one from West, to be there to have like different schools' input and ideas. And
I think some of the questions that were asked that night, maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, but I think some of the students had questions about what the role would actually be, what would be the purpose of them being there. I think we talked about just giving the students a voice, but not necessarily, you wouldn't be voting, but you would be there to answer questions if we had something come up in our meeting that we needed some clarification or student voice in. So I think that was, those were some of the concerns. Our boardroom looks different now. We all know that it looks different, and so that was brought up as well, just making sure that if you are there as a student, you understand that we do have people speaking to the board, and you'll be sitting there as well when people are speaking to the board. So all that was brought up as well. Can you think of any other things that concerns or questions?
I think one thing that may be more of a CSR thing is who's going to be at the board. We have like every single school represented on our council, so like the idea of which is why we want like different people from like every few weeks changing, and also getting more students at the board, like knowing that what's happening at the board meetings, from like sophomores or freshmen, having these upperclassmen talking about that to the students. And
I think something we do need to talk about, and we did not talk about it at the CSR meeting, but we do need to have the discussion about this is the District 6 Board of Education meeting, so we might want to think about what charter school reps, maybe how can we help them approach their board as well to see if they can have a voice at their board. We haven't had that conversation, so that's something I think we need to talk about. But other than that, I think we really just wanted to come tonight and see what you all think about it, if you like it, unless you have anything else, Jilly or Richard.
To answer the first question, I think you brought up of like what our purpose would be. I think as a group, we kind of agreed and like thought that it would be more of like fulfilling our purpose of working alongside with the District 6 board, school board, because that is, I believe, what we are intended to do, to what I think is bridge the gap from student to district, and like not being a voting member and just discussing maybe during work sessions or board meetings of various ideas and topics. So yeah, that's what I think our purpose would look like.
And as you say that, I think about our community member, Mr. Teets, who comes and speaks to us quite often. And as we listen to our community members speak, as he spoke about an issue that he was having with students on the bus, their behavior, that was immediately addressed by the Council of Student Reps, and you're working on that to make sure that that's something that you can do as a board to help out with that. So I think that's also a benefit and a positive benefit of you all being there as well.
I agree. I feel like issues like those could reach to us even quicker, and that we could address and possibly help along to work with people like Mr. Teets to solve that.
So I don't know, Mr. Matthews, if you just want to go around and have people give their ideas and think of questions they might have for Jillian and Richard.
Sure. Ms. Sullivan.
I don't really have a question, but I did like the statement you said about bridging the gap between the board and the students, and it does kind of give you guys a little input and let your voices be heard. So I actually really like this idea, and I support it 100%. So bravo to you guys for showing up. And again, I do have to ask one question. How many student representatives are in your group?
We have about 20.
20, okay, and they're all interested. That's awesome. Thank you.
Are all the schools represented with the? council representatives?
Currently, we're missing Jefferson and University, and we're hoping to get some people from Gap, but we're going to gather more people hopefully next
Good.
year.
What can we do to help you?
I think if you're able to like reach out, talk about the council, what we do. We have done that before and we didn't get much back from that, but I think just spreading the word on the council would be really great and getting more interest from that. So.
Well, thank you. Well, when you're at the board meetings, you'll get a lot of recognition. So thank you guys for coming.
I guess my question, I've been at a number of the CASB sessions with students, and yeah, some of the other districts have like official sort of appointments or even terms where they have their student board member that serves a certain term or things like that. Are we talking more of just like a rotating panel, or are we talking more of like we have these 3 students that serve for this school year? Just curious. I mean, we could kind of do it whichever way you want.
Based off our interest level, I think the rotating would be better to get more students able to be participating in this. So
Yeah, that sounds good.
Mr. Bentley?
I only have like a comment, I guess. I was at the Board of Governors meeting for university, and they had a student on up with their board too, so they're already kind of doing something like this to a degree, but apparently not with your guys's. They're missing somebody, but I think it's great. I think we heard a couple of talks at CASB about how they had a board member. I think it was something me and you went to, but they sounded like a great idea, and they said they've had a lot of success. So I think that's the whole point. We're here for the kids, so good to have them more involved.
Yeah. And I just had a logistical question. I think it's a great idea. Just even last meeting when you guys gave your more than 2 cents about the calendar proposals was really helpful to see it from your perspective. So would you guys be joining us for the work session and the business meeting? Is that how it would work?
That was what we were thinking. I think being at the work session, we're able to be more involved in talking with the board members, but also I think at the board meetings as well, just to see how that goes and then learn from that as well.
And then the 20 representatives are from freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year, all 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. I wonder, so I was kind of wondering, similarly to Natalie, so I totally get rotation means you get more participants, but then not as much continuity, from one meeting to the next. I was wondering if it could be something reserved just for the upperclassmen, and then but then I don't know how CSR works, if you were a freshman in CSR, if you will eventually be a junior in CSR.
For CSR, you can stay all 4 years if you will.
Okay.
And yeah, that was one thing that came up, who was going to be participating at that. And so one suggestion was voting for people to participate and be maybe have a longer term. Yeah.
So I think that what we wanted tonight was to get your ideas, and it sounds like you're all thinking this is a great idea. And then we talked about the fact that we would really like to start it this spring, if possible, to try it out, right? Because we have seniors that have been very involved, Jilly being one. So I think that it would be important if we can start it this spring and then figure out a schedule. I don't know how that works for you, Dr. Pell. Oh, Michael, you didn't get to talk, sorry.
No, I'm good. I was
Okay.
just going to
I think really it's equipment. But if it looks like we want to move in this direction, then we'll start to work with staff to get the appropriate equipment so that the students have microphones and eventually buzzers. That's going to take a little longer to get, as you all know. And then determining where they sit in the boardroom and where we place you. Where do you get to sit? So, but I think we can work all those logistics out. I think what I'm most interested in is the board's thoughts on how the role works with the students, and then I think this thing about term, how long do you serve at a time, how many meetings do you commit to, because there is a continuity piece. There's at least one item on there tonight that will come back again, that we've already seen at 2 previous work sessions, and will come back again at the next meeting for a decision. So I think that continuity is an important piece, and I also appreciate the desire to have more people involved if possible. So I think we're thinking 2 seats. Is
I think
that
we
what we're
talked
thinking
about
was
having
2
at least
seats?
2 people. We felt like that would be, really felt like it would be more comfortable and add to that voice.
I have a question, just how do you think it would change council student representatives, like your meetings? So knowing that, how much advance notice do you need to sort of talk about things as students, knowing we're going to talk about something, so that the people that come to our meetings really represent the voice of the students?
I think, like when the agenda comes out, or like participating, maybe not like being present, but like maybe watching the previous board meeting to know about like what went on before, having some insight on that, and not just coming in like completely like blank,
Yeah.
or like at least because our meetings aren't like very often; they're like every other week, and so having that notice, that meeting before the actual board meeting, and knowing what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of our business, like calendar, happens annually, and it's a good chance to. I'm just wondering how this might reconfigure your meetings, so that it looks maybe a little bit more like a DAC meeting, or other teacher advisory council or something like that, where you're hearing from the group, and then those people are coming to represent that voice a little bit. Or am I misunderstanding?
Now, I think
Dr.
what I
Brooks?
hear you saying, President Matthews, is that would it be possible for the council student reps to serve as advisory? So maybe they know the calendar's coming up and they have an opportunity in between the meetings to get student input, so then they come back and share with us what that student input is. Or, we're looking at book review policies tonight. Is there an opportunity, if they were currently sitting, for them to have gone to their council student reps and gotten feedback from students about that book review policy, so that if you have a question about what they're hearing from their council, then we can have that feedback,
Yeah.
which would change the structure of your meetings. So a piece of your meeting would be about school board topics, probably, if we went that direction.
And I think we would be able to fit that into our schedule, or modify our meeting time to be able to accommodate that.
I will just tell you that I worked in a school district that they had a council student reps across the 5 comprehensive high schools and the 3 alternatives high schools, and those students were instrumental in 2 significant changes in that school district. One being changing the way that class rank was counted and measured, and valedictorian and salutatorian, and the other being around school start and end times, because we were able to really get feedback across the schools and bring that feedback back into the boardroom.
Yeah, and I actually think that would help in terms of recruiting students who want to be on this, if you guys had a voice. And so I'm very supportive of it. It's very exciting to think about the kind of voice that you could have in school board meetings and decisions that are made, again, as we've seen with things like calendar. So thank you guys for being here.
May I ask
Sure.
your office feedback on just kind of placement? We did a little bit of brainstorming today, Ms. Myers and I did, and so one option would be to do another table, to the left of me, and set that up for the 2 students. Another option would be to actually have Ms. Myers move away from the table where she is, because there are 3 seats there. So if Ms. Myers moved, then that would open up 2 seats. So then when Lindsay is here with Amy, she would just pull up a chair and not have a separate chair and microphone. So that's another option. Do you all have an opinion about that? Do you want me to just take that with staff and see what's best for our IT folks to set up? Because of course part of this will be microphones and buttons too.
Anybody have any
Just
thoughts?
Whatever's easy logistically.
That's what I would think too. Any other questions?
What if they did, if they're gonna bring 3, maybe bring like a liaison, like somebody that's a longer term, like you wanted for continuity, and then rotate the other 2 out, so that you get both, 2 birds with 1 stone. You get multiple people coming in as they wanted, if you have a lot of people that want to come in, but then you still have one person maybe serves a 3, 6, or a year-long term or something, and kind of is our point of contact, and then you guys could kind of fill in the two new ones if they only come 3 meetings or a couple meetings or something. And you kind of get the best of both worlds.
I like that idea. I'll think about that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could do a tentative start date on March 27th. That'd be after spring break, and that would give, because the next board meeting comes up pretty quickly in 2 weeks, or is that workable?
I think we can have a temporary, for sure, situation. That's a month away.
Yeah.
Over a month. We should be able to have something at least temporary by then, yes. I would think so if we want to try and do that.
And will that give you, Richard, you and Jilly, would that give you time to work with the council?
Yeah, I think that will. We have meetings between that, so yeah.
So I guess, I think I heard some of you, some comment asking about charter school representation, and I think it's important we determine that and we give the students some directive on that, because Richard has been really involved and he goes to Union Colony, so do we want to work with Richard to try to get him a spot on the Union Colony board, or is his spot, with this board? So we would just need some guidance from you all on that, I think.
Or both. And he's another connection between the charters and us.
That might be a lot. I don't know how many more meetings that would add to your schedule to be on 2 separate boards.
So my involvement in school has only been recent, since sophomore year. So for a long time I didn't know the school, there's the school board and all these meetings. And it's been great getting to know this, but I have not gotten to know much of my own charter school board. So if I could get to know that, I would like to. And I'd be happy to work with both of boards, and I guess also be the voice for both sides, and relay any information from that. So yeah, I am interested though.
I think the charters meet a lot less than we do too. Once a month maybe, or not quite as much. I know when I attended university's meeting, they were talking about their calendar also, and they brought up us talking about our calendar, but they didn't know a whole lot. Like they knew that we'd brought up 4 proposals, and they weren't real happy with 2 of them, and so they were waiting on us to set our calendar so they could finish theirs kind of to a degree, and so it might be nice to have
Typical.
that. Yep.
Dr. Pilch, could we reach out to the charters and just see if they're willing to have Council of Student Reps on sit with their boards? I mean, it seems to make the most sense, right? Because as we're saying, calendar at Union Colony is potentially different than the calendar at District 6, or the calendar at University is different than the District 6 calendar. So, it makes the most sense to have them at their own boards.
In reality, you all make very few decisions. I mean, you're going to make the ones tonight that do on the 2 charter school contracts that are coming forward. But beyond that charter school contract, you all really don't make governance decisions for them. Their board does that. So they adopt their own calendar, they adopt their own curriculum, their own policies. So I think that's an important consideration too. And we certainly can reach out and try to facilitate that.
I wonder if we would be able to, I'm wondering how many of the reps would be in the same mindset as Richard, that, yeah, I would like to get to know my board better, but I also think it's important then to know what's going on at this level as well. I'm guessing, just knowing who's in your council, that there are people that would be willing and wanting to do that as well, at least to get started. Don't know how it will be next year, but do you think there are people that are in that mindset?
I think definitely. I know for some people it might be hard due to their other extracurricular commitments, but I think it could be one of our highlights to get more people on our CSR council, just to highlight that and get people that are interested in attending board meetings, getting to know what's the logistics of their schools, and so.
And we do have charter school representation on our district accountability and our teachers advisory council both. They're a part of both of those groups when we're gathering feedback back, and I think they appreciate being a part of the bigger conversation and providing input into our decisions, even though our decision may only tangentially, impact them in some way. But we do know the charters wait for our calendar and our schedules as they're determining theirs as well. And so maybe what's important is to think about always having at least one be non-charter, traditional schools, and then the other seat could be charter or non-charter, however that lands, but always being certain, that you don't have both students who are from charter schools, perhaps. I don't know. I think it's great that students think it's exciting and interesting to be a part of a school board meeting. I think that's really fabulous. Very exciting.
Well, so then what it sounds like is we'll tentatively plan for the 27th of March as a starting date, and then Jilly and Richard, you'll go back and talk to the council. I think next week is the meeting?
Yes.
And then, that's great. Thank you all. It's exciting. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both.
Let me know what I can do to help. Okay? See you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Guys, we are right on time. It is 4:30, and we are to our legislative update. So I see Mr. Fall coming to give that update. Dr. Pilch, before he gets here, is there anything you need to?
I think Mr. Fall's going to take a little different approach tonight. Rather than trying to throw all the legislation at you at once, we're going to throw some key pieces at you and give you a chance to ruminate on these and go in that direction tonight rather than, there is still a lot of proposed legislation. It's still very early in the session, and so there's a lot out there. So rather than trying to cover all of that, we've hit some key points that we'll talk about tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch, members of the board. Yeah, so usually when I do my legislative update, I go through about 20 bills, and I can see your eyes glaze over after about the first slide. So
I was going to not say that part.
I provided just a short summary of a few bills that I was hoping we could kind of touch base on. And no offense to you, I realize this is too much information.
I feel personally attacked.
No, it wasn't. So just speaking from experience. So what I've done here is just kind of going over a number of bills that, have some significant impacts in my opinion, and then a number of bills that really were introduced by our specific Greeley legislatures or senators, so Senator Kirkmeyer and Representative Young. So we'll just go right into it. Again, if you have any questions, please just stop me. I did leave number 9 at the end of this sheet that I handed out to you all. If you have another bill that I didn't mention or you want to kind of discuss in further detail, please let me know and I can do some more research on those bills and what position maybe we need to take. So this first one is Senate Bill 2371, the Education Accountability Act. I have a position of taking monitor. This will be reviewed by the Senate Education Committee on February 15th, so in 2 days. What this bill does is it allows school districts to seek judicial review or file a civil action against any rule, regulation, or final order of the State Board of Education related to state, district, or school level accountability, performance planning, reporting of student growth data, the school awards program, and local accountability systems. And so just so you have some background on this, the State Board of Education has taken 14 distinct actions related to the accountability clock for a school district, including once voting to remove the accreditation of a district and initiate the process of district reorganization. The School Board of Education has a lot of power and makes a lot of informed decisions that control school districts and school boards. And so this bill really operates to give some local control back to boards of education in terms of being able to seek judicial review of an action taken by the State Board of Education, which right now the law doesn't allow for things like that. So it just gives a little bit of power back to school districts. I will say that this bill does come highly supported by CASB and CASE and a lot of school districts across the state. I just have a position of monitoring just because, I think it's always important to understand the dynamic in our relationship as it pertains to the State Board of Education, and that it's really not our goal to pick fights with the State Board of Education, but perhaps there might be a good reason. We haven't seen any distinct actions taken by the State Board of Education against Greeley-Evans School District 6, and maybe one day we might want to have this kind of power and authority given to us to seek judicial action against them. We certainly know that we could be mired in litigation for years for a certain case that could cost the district a lot of money to do. But again, thinking about things like local control, it is important that we do have this. So I just have a position of monitor as my recommended position, but I'm certainly open to kind of any considerations or suggestions the board might have.
Is this the one that they told us about? The way they explained it to us when I was down there the other day is they was highly supportive. He actually showed us, told us about an example from Adams.
It's
right?
Adams 14.
Right, that this would have saved them or gone differently. I can't remember. It was something about a school that was on a turnaround, right? And they forced them to hire certain people and to bring in a certain, like, they basically took the control away from the school, and it didn't work and cost the school board millions of dollars anyways. And then they were right back to square one a couple years later. So it's from the way it was explained to us down there, it sounded really good.
The CASB representative, Matt Cook, he was just talking about, like, if a law comes out from the legislature and you feel as a business, you know, that is infringing upon your rights as a business, then you can go to the courts and say, hey, this isn't going to work out for my business. But as a school district, we have no recourse to do that. I asked him, like, what if Adams 14 had said, no, we're not hiring that consulting firm, or no, we're not doing this or that, then the state board could have sued that school district. So the CASB position is that this is just sort of basic, I guess, in a way. You know, this is just your basic way to say, wait a second, I want a judicial review of what is being told to do in this situation. And because all school boards and all school districts, you know, are very much about local control, and that's in our Constitution, this is the provision for that. And to me, it does seem kind of strange that we talk about local control. It's precedented in the law. It's in the law, but then we have absolutely no judicial recourse if we were to have a disagreement. So I think I also would lean towards supporting it.
It is a stark contrast between Greeley-Evans and some of the, you know, we almost have two states politically, you know, and so Democratic controlled school of Board of Education for the state, they might have different ideas than maybe our local community does at times. So I think it's smart to keep our options open that way. I mean, like I said, the way it was explained to me, which I'm ignorant infant in the school laws for sure, so take it for what it's worth, but it sounded like a really good idea.
Well, and I think one of the potential negative comments about it is like, well, then school boards are going to be suing the state board all the time. Well, that still costs a lot of money. That takes a lot of time. I don't think that that's going to be the case. It's just giving the option if it were needed. So.
Yeah.
So I do think it's important to point out the times we have been before the state board under their jurisdiction, and it's been multiple times from 8 years ago when I arrived here, and we had 11 schools on priority improvement or turnaround, and we were in front of that state board many times. Some of you were there with us. So I think it just really changes that dynamic of what is the role of the state board. And so I think if this is the only solution, personally, then I would probably support it. I think the problem is the whole system needs overhauled. The whole system of accountability and the whole system of the role of the State Board of Education. And so this is a workaround, in my opinion, to try to fix problems with how we are managed. So we say we're local control, but the State Board has a lot of control when it comes to accountability. They don't have a lot of control over a lot of other things, but they have a lot of control around accountability and especially if a district falls into poor achievement. They also have a lot of control around charter approval or charter denial. And so I think, you know, if you all as a board want us to fight those controls in this manner, you know, we'll certainly direct our lobbyists to do that. I worry that there's a great deal of special interest here in folks who are very disappointed in the decisions that the state board made, so they want legislation so the state board can't do that again. And maybe the state board shouldn't be able to do that again, but that's how the system is. They have a lot of management when it comes to school and school districts that fall into priority improvement and turnaround. And that's the accountability system problem that's broken. So that's different than the control the state board has, I think. But I understand why CASB's supporting it. They, not only did the state board direct them to use an outside agency, they also recently, last year, took action to tell them, the district need to be reconstituted. And so, I mean, if I'm Adams 14, I absolutely want some recourse to that, right? And those of you who were at the table back in my early years, you know that we had a lot of recommendations and directives coming from the state board, and we had to figure out how to manage that, and we had an obligation to turn those schools around, which we have done. So it's, I do think districts will sue frequently, probably us. Even I do. If we have the ability to sue the state board or ask for a judicial review on decisions they make around things like accountability and charter schools, I think school districts will. I think they absolutely will, and it will swing with how the state board is made up. Right now, we have a primarily Democratic board, and so right now we're seeing more charter schools not being approved. But 3 years ago, every charter school that went before the state board on appeal was approved on appeal, and the district was told to go back and make that charter application work. So this one's a tricky one, and I think Greeley will matter in it, and so I'm glad you're talking about it. I wanted to weigh in on some perspectives I have, there's only probably a handful of superintendents that are hanging with me on some of these thoughts. Most of the Denver area superintendents are supportive of the judicial review process and are supportive of the ability for Adams 14 to be able to sue the state board. And if I might feel that way too 7 years ago. That wasn't an option for us 7 years ago. I don't know if we would have chosen it. I was approached early in my time here, I think probably my second year, by a couple of other districts with this idea of coming together for a lawsuit around accountability against the Colorado Department of Ed. And we did not engage in that, and neither did those other 2 school districts that approached me about that. So I think this has been something that's been in the making or thinking for quite some time. Because when you hit a wall, really judicial review and going through litigation is really sometimes your only solution, unfortunately. So,
Would it be wise to maybe take this battle as a win and then keep going on with the war and trying to keep going up towards your,
Yeah.
I guess if accountability needs overhauled, that's probably a lot
It's a great
bigger
point, Mr.
task
Bentley.
than trying to
Yeah.
get. That's not going to happen this year, obviously. I don't think.
we hope we're on the path, but we don't think the legislation has yet been dropped to look at a
Exactly.
change in the state
Right.
accountability
So
system.
does this give
even.
you some options
It's
until
supposed to
then?
be. Yeah, that's a
Maybe.
great point. It's a great point. And so we're certainly, we will continue to learn from Ann Barkus, and we want to continue to hear from you all. Should there be a desire for us to shift from monitor to support? And frankly, I'm all about local control, and I think if the state board needs to turn those decisions over to the local board, but it's far more than the accountability system.
Yeah, it's one thing for them to tell us that we need to do that, and a whole nother to pick them
Yeah.
and force us in the contracts that we.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this isn't my area of expertise.
Well, litigation is not mine either. Yeah. What else?
So are we thinking the monitor is smartest right now as we wait and see? I'm listening to people say it sounds like we should support or monitor. I mean,
I'm most comfortable with monitor,
Mhm.
to be honest, because you don't know the way the state BOE will swing in other years.
I feel the same way.
Well, I think that's a great discussion and certainly something we can continue to monitor and move to a position of support. I think that those changes can be made, and like I said, it will be in front of the Senate Education Committee on February 15th, and maybe they'll be looking towards amendments or things of that nature. So we'll continue to monitor that for you.
And I'll be frank, I haven't had a conversation with Matt Cook to hear more about, really what CASB is thinking behind that. I've only heard the conversations at DASC and then kind of from our own lobbyist. And she was still new into this. So I think there's more for us to learn as well.
Yeah, he had a lot to say about it.
Moving on, we have Senate Bill 2361. This is Eliminate State Assessment in Social Studies. The title of the bill is pretty straightforward. That's exactly what this bill looks to do. It would eliminate the requirement to administer a state assessment in social studies to elementary and secondary school students. Under current law, we have to administer social studies to students once in elementary and once in middle school. And the department administers the test in a representative sample of public schools each year, and each public school at least once every 3 years. So this bill would just essentially remove that requirement. This would reduce state appropriations annually by about $1 million, and then it would reduce just kind of the administrative burden of administering social studies tests to school districts in schools. You know, the bill was amended to clarify social studies standards and values of teaching social studies standards should still be included. It's not getting rid of the teaching of social studies standards and civics. We still think that's really important. Speaking from personal experience, social studies was by far my favorite class when I was in high school, and certainly that's something that they're going to continue to do, but it just kind of reduces that burden. I think this is a good step forward in kind of working on revising the accountability and accreditation system. So that is why I make this recommendation to support this bill.
But why do we eliminate just a subject? I mean, so we only would test for math, ELA, and science? Why social studies eliminated or not considered?
So my best guess at social studies is it's kind of it's almost a memorization type test where you're kind of required to remember facts about history and kind of maybe apply those facts to modern day. I'm not really sure. I haven't seen a social studies state assessment, but I think that that's less kind of logic based, and I don't know if Dr. Pilch can speak more to that, but that's just kind
this
of my
was the
assumption.
latest assessment that was added to the state assessment. So throughout the life of the state assessments, social studies came on last, and it was stayed during COVID. So the year that we test just math and literacy, science, and social, I don't recall if we tested science that year, but social studies was not tested, and so I think there's some feeling that there's not a lot of value added. We don't test as frequently. We're not testing it as many grade levels as we are with math and English language arts.
And would it be safe to say that with social studies, as you're teaching social studies standards, obviously, but there's also I think the idea that in a social studies class you're also doing reading and writing, and you're learning from writing and reading, and so I think that's probably, from an educator perspective, I would say that a lot of that is maybe in the reading and writing curriculum, assessment as well.
And I'm looking to Jenny and Brian. I don't know if you all want to weigh in at all on this. I mean, this is your world, certainly moreover than Nate's and mine.
I think exactly what you said, as you have passages within the English language arts tests that are informational texts that are science and social studies related. Also, when we were doing the social studies assessments, it was a sampling as well, and so it was not as large as every school being tested as well, and every grade level, like we do with ELA and math.
Is this a permanent elimination of the social studies, or is this just until these standards come through?
It would eliminate the social studies standards from the state assessment altogether.
For the whole state of Colorado, is that?
Right.
Nate, did I hear you say that they'll still do testing in middle school?
So this would eliminate
All of it?
all of it,
Okay.
elementary and middle school.
I guess I don't understand. The purpose of the state assessment is to make sure that our children are growing and achieving in their academic pursuits, but we don't want to measure one entire subject.
Yeah, I think, Ms. Mash, it is that balance of how much time we spend testing compared to the value of the test. And so Jenny, I don't know if you want to talk some more about what the data is that we get from the social studies assessment, and it's okay if you're not prepared to do that. We can always give them information later.
Yeah, and it really wasn't as rich as the data that we would get in the other content areas because it was a sampling and because we weren't getting data over time. We can certainly put together, kind of more formal piece for you around that. But because it was just select grade levels and just select schools, it really wasn't as meaningful data across our system as when you're consistently testing across all grades and all schools.
I guess I just don't understand why the state doesn't want, it just feels like we're putting less value on that subject matter.
Yeah, I think
if we're not going to test for it.
I'd have to hear a little bit more too before it seems backwards, I mean, almost like undoing what we've done, or they've done. It's kind of peculiar, I guess.
Well, I think-
it just sounds, I feel like it's just my ignorance since I'm not an educator, but I just don't, we want to teach, the 4 subjects, right? Math, reading, science, and social studies, but we just don't really care about
Test
testing
scores.
for one, and I don't get that, so.
Well, but we already don't test, right? I mean, what they're saying is that the data isn't very consistent because we don't test social studies in
So then it
all
seems like we want
grades.
more testing instead of less.
Well, I mean, but then we're
more.
asking for more testing, right?
Well, I mean, I don't ever want to say more testing. I do not. I don't think.
Well, that's what this is about,
Yeah.
can we lessen the load on testing? I mean, that's really, I think the supporters of this have said, this does not add enough value for it to take the time and the work that is necessary to administer it. But we can certainly get more information, and we could shift to monitor if you all prefer that.
Well, I don't think I
You just
I
want to
don't
understand
get
better.
it.
Yeah.
I'm
Feels like
like-
we're missing something.
I mean, it seems like, why wouldn't you just? It just is they're putting. There's less value on that subject matter,
I
right?
guess the fear would be if so the fear is if you're teaching for a test and you're not getting tested on this material, then you're not going to teach as well in it. It's I guess as a teacher, from the teacher's perspective, if they're I'm teaching this material, and I mean the kids still have to take tests at the end of each quarter or whatever, but if there's no standardized tests to strive for whatever score, will the teacher teach as well? I don't know.
I guess I'm just why are we picking one random thing to not test on? I mean, that's what it feels like.
Well,
to
I think
me.
it's because Jenny, do you want to respond to that, or Brian? I think you guys, yeah.
Yeah, we have only so many targets of opportunity when it comes to instruction. And when we have a lot of testing happening, it takes away days of instruction, and it becomes overwhelming for our teachers. So mathematics and scientific literacy skills, definitely. Reading, writing, definitely. When you think about literacy, I think those other subjects, they are just as important, but at the same time, it's a big lift on our teachers and our systems to do a lot of testing. And, it really takes away from what we need to do, and that's just more instruction in a way, and more instructional ways.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be clear. I do not want more testing. And if the CMAS went away, that'd be wonderful. But I just don't understand choosing one subject to not test on. That's where I'm hung up. And so if you're saying math and reading are these skills, and science comes under math and social studies comes under reading, so that's why we're just testing math and reading, then I get that. But it just feels like we don't care if our students learn this content or something.
Yeah, I would imagine social studies educators feel that way too, Natalie, what you just said. I mean, that's probably very real. I think my understanding is that as we had this reprieve of less testing and we had more time for instruction and we didn't have as much data from social studies, that educators are not seeing the value in the data that they are getting and compared to the value in having that additional instructional time.
How long has these social studies tests been going on?
They've canceled it for the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's been
But like you said, it was the most recently
Yeah.
instigated one. when
Well,
it was
because
put
we
in
were
place.
able to not do it during the last 2 years after COVID, I think educators feel like we didn't lose anything by not having those results. And prior to that, we didn't have consistent data across the system. And so I think that's probably how the legislation got started, was that there was not a gap when we didn't have the assessment. Why do we, so kind of that question of why do we need this assessment?
If
And-
it's not giving us good data, right? I mean, and that's
think
the
that's what we
assumption,
hear.
Jenny,
That's
I
what
mean,
we
that we're,
hear.
we're not getting good data from this test like we do our math and our ELA test, because we test every grade, every school, every year. So if we're not getting, it just sounds like we try to do this compromise, and
Yeah.
it's not, it doesn't really work, is what I'm guessing.
Is that
it,
fair?
that we either need
Social
to
studies at
do
3
all
grade
or do
levels?
nothing.
Was it at 3? So social studies was 3 grade levels?
Do we test for science still?
Yes.
More often and more frequently, so that's useful?
It is limited grade levels, but it wasn't the sampling like social studies, that was only certain schools, it's all schools.
Oh.
I have to agree with Natalie. It seems like we're not weighting the social studies education as having much value behind it. And so whereas the proficiency of knowing what the kids are learning and what they're maintaining and retaining as they move forward,
So maybe-
going to be coming into play.
Are they thinking they want to put maybe one day more testing it, like
No.
broader? We're just
No, and I mean, maybe what we should be proposing to our lobbyists is legislation that tests social studies as frequently as we test language arts and math, and really put the value there if we really believe it's valuable, which is what I expect will happen someday. Somebody will propose that.
I just definitely don't want anyone to hear that I'm saying I want more tests. I just want, I value social studies curriculum very much. And so I just, yeah.
I think our staff would say our local assessments are more valuable to us than anything we got from the state test.
And it just seems like this is, again, back to the accountability system. The testing system is needing an overhaul.
Well, I think this is a terrific discussion. I think it's appropriate that we move to monitor on this bill. And, just given the interest of time, I will respond to these questions. I'll do a write-up for you all and give you some more information around this bill and kind of maybe some of the reasonings behind it. I do know we got to get into a discussion on the calendar, so, and I'm a little bit over time, so for the rest of these, I will give you a formal write-up, just kind of giving you an explanation of what these bills really say and kind of my reasonings for my proposed position.
I think you're okay, Nate. I mean, we have time built in, so I think
We'll,
you're
we'll try to not ask quite so many questions.
Yeah.
No, please, that's not, I don't want to not do that. I would actually prefer that so much. Okay, well, and we can move on and just let me know when you'd prefer me to stop. So, Senate Bill 2329 is disproportionate discipline in public schools. This will be heard by the Senate Education Committee tomorrow on February 14th, 2023. This bill creates kind of what is a self-audit. So school districts would be required to adopt policy and implement policy to address disproportionate disciplinary practices that may occur at the school. So you'd have to track a lot of data and information for all students who have been disciplined based on or disaggregated by data, so gender, race, ethnicity, disability, etc. Then you'd have to monitor that data, and if you were showing that you disproportionately disciplined certain groups over others, then again, kind of in a self-audit, you'd have to adopt an annual improvement plan if you show those disproportionate disciplinary practices and what efforts you're taking to improve on those disproportionate disciplinary practices. The bill also adds requirements for school districts to consider certain factors before suspending students, and they change that language to you must consider the factors. Right now, it's you may consider those factors when suspending or expelling a student. And just to read what those are, and I had it right up in front of me. Age of student, disciplinary history of the student, whether the student has a disability, the seriousness of the violation committed by the student, whether the violation committed by the student threatened the safety of students or staff members, and whether a lesser intervention would properly address the violation committed by the student. So right now, we may consider those factors when we are looking to expel or suspend a student, but now we must consider them if this bill were to pass. And it would also add on documenting requirements that we would have to provide documentation on any alternative disciplinary measures before expelling or suspending a student. I have monitor or amend this bill. I think as with all of these student discipline bills, it is really important that we are continuing to adjust our student discipline and how we conduct that, and ensuring that we're doing it in a non-discriminatory fashion. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. What I am saying is this bill doesn't come with it any additional appropriations for school districts to do all this data tracking, data monitoring, and policy implementation. It would put a strain on our system in a lot of ways to really provide all this information. Again, it's a self-audit, so there's not really a whole lot of understanding or requirements about what the state might do to a school that shows disproportionate disciplinary practices. My apologies. And I certainly think this bill could use some amendments when looking at what would need to go into those annual improvement plans, how schools could adjust if they were to implement an annual improvement plan, and show that we have done everything that we can to address those disproportionate disciplinary practices. And again, I think just kind of requiring schools to consider certain factors rather than allowing us the leeway to consider certain factors when it comes to expelling or suspending certain students gives us a lot more flexibility in reaching decisions. When it comes to alternative disciplinary measures, these are things that we are already doing in this district, and we are certainly following the law when it comes to expelling and suspending students in non-discriminatory ways. So just to kind of create this unfunded mandate to provide a bunch of additional things that I believe District 6 is already doing seems like it'll be kind of a burden. So it's my position that we monitor or perhaps amend this bill, but that is just kind of my proposed position to you all.
We had this conversation in the fall, correct, with a similar bill that came to us, or was it last spring? But we talked about the fact that we do have things in place here. And so, yeah, I agree with the monitor, with the amendments.
And please feel free to ask questions or make comments. I didn't mean to.
I think we heard something about this one too, and I'm going to have to look into it a little bit more before I could. I think we heard some cons to it.
Yeah, you're going to see more districts oppose this
Yeah, I think
than monitor. Or that's what I'm seeing anyway.
It was loud in there, so I don't remember exactly the way they put it. It was wild. So
yeah, in most school districts, I'm showing Cooter, Lewis Palmer, Littleton, Douglas County. They're all looking to amend this bill. I don't see any outright opposition, but that's kind of the general position for a lot of school districts. I guess Cherry Creek is monitoring this bill, so. Okay, House Bill 231064, Interstate Teacher Mobility Compact. This was introduced by Representative Young. You might have seen an article in the Greeley Tribune, and I thought it really provided the thoughtful summary of this bill. It did pass the House third reading on February 9th, 2023, which means it is now being assigned to the Senate. I haven't seen where it's headed in the Senate. But what this bill does is it would form an interstate compact with participating states. This would help to streamline and simplify the licensing process for teachers to receive a license from a member state. I think this is particularly beneficial when it comes to active military members and their spouses. It supports relocation of those folks to go from one state to another. You know, we don't have all the states. I think it's going to require 10 states to kind of get into this interstate compact, and we've seen legislation from 7 states, so it's going to require a number of states to also approve similar legislation. You know, I will say that it does give discretion to the receiving state on these teachers that are coming forward. You know, we don't have any outright obligation to accept every teacher that comes forward, but it does kind of help free up that process and streamline it a little bit more. And again, I think the real benefit here is an eye towards active military members and spouses and things of that nature. And so I do recommend that we support this bill.
and I think we heard a little bit about this one too, and it makes sense, especially like Colorado's kind of a hot spot of people moving into, so it would help us, especially with our struggles finding staff. It seemed like a good idea from everything I heard.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would just help get more educators, even folks who are not active military members or their spouses. So I think it could be certainly beneficial. Number 5, this is a bill that was introduced, that's on your second page, Stop the Bleed School Training Kits. This is another bill. It's going to be introduced. It was finalized on January 26th, of this year, again introduced by Representative Young, and it would require the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment to distribute Stop the Bleeding training kits and materials to K-12 schools that opt into receiving them. This would be completely voluntary for schools or school districts to receive these Stop the Bleed training kits, but any school that decided that they wanted these Stop the Bleed training kits, they would have to take a training. In case you're curious about what is in a Stop the Bleed training kit, it is one tourniquet endorsed by the United States Department of Defense Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, one compression bandage, one bleeding control bandage, protective gloves, one marker, one pair of scissors, and Stop the Bleeding training materials developed by the Stop the Bleed program. So, I think this is great. It would give us the opportunity to kind of receive additional training and perhaps address potentially serious injuries that might occur at our schools. I will point out from my reading of this bill, I didn't see any particular or specific immunity provisions that were included in this bill. My guess is that the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act still applies, but what were to happen if a school were to accept a Stop the Bleeding kit and something were to go horribly wrong, and a student were, again, something were to go horribly wrong, would the school be immune from suit or for damages in a situation like that? Would we be protected in a situation like that? Are we just adding an additional layer of safety with our school and staff? And is that training going to be thorough enough to do that? I don't know. But again, I have a proposed position to monitor this bill because, again, we haven't really seen any amendments come forward. We haven't seen if this has been assigned to a committee yet. But it is sponsored by Representative Young, and I know this is kind of an area she's pretty passionate about.
I think I would ask, A, how big of a problem is this? B, tourniquets are nothing to mess with if you don't know what you're doing. Even if you do know what you're doing, there's still time limits and stuff, or you're losing a limb instead of a bad cut. And then C, is it just a giant sales pitch for this company, right? These kits, or is how is it written that are we forcing schools to just buy and fund this company's sales?
Yeah, I think those are really great points, Mr. Bentley. And I think the other part is if a school decides we don't want to stop the bleed training kit, and then something were to happen, and then now there's this whole kind of messaging that if they had this Stop the Bleed training kit, that they would have perhaps prevented this, tragic injury from occurring. I think it puts a little bit of political pressure on schools to participate. So, I do see some certain concerning aspects to this.
Nate, does the Good Samaritan law, does that cover people? Does that cover schools as well?
Yes, it does. So we have the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act and then the Good Samaritan law, which is maybe my guess why there is no specific immunity provision written into this. But, my guess is if people are in their best effort using these kits to help somebody, we would be okay.
We had a situation a few years ago at our school, and I think a shirt was used as a tourniquet, and it worked. So, I'll leave the rest of the decision up to you guys, but I think start tearing clothes and tying them up, I think it works. So, but
Sounds like we might need more information, though, on this one, Nate. So,
Monitor's
thank
fine
you.
with me,
Yeah.
Yeah, Representative Young is very passionate about this. So I haven't had a conversation with her directly. I just have heard her speak on it. Probably should have more conversation with her.
Getting into the last three, Senate Bill 23-136, adjustments to school funding fiscal year 2022-2023. This bill is quickly passing. It went through the Senate. It's already been assigned to the House Appropriations Committee. What they're really doing is they're maintaining the budget stabilization factor at the original amount appropriated for just this year for the 2022-2023 school year. Of course, we'd always like to see that budget stabilization factor go down, even for years where it was appropriated. And so this does decrease the state share by $76 million. I will say, and this was introduced by Senator Kirkmeyer, in kind of the way that this was written and how it was proposed, the actual total programming was higher than originally expected. There were fewer students that were originally appropriated for. The per pupil count was lower, and the at-risk factor was higher, which equated to about $17 million. And then the other piece of this is that the local share has gone up significantly this year, and I think that's because a lot of school districts like District 6 passed local ballot measures under MLOs, and so that has gone up significantly. So this is decreasing the state share. I'm always going to be of the position that we want the state to do their part and pay their percentage and stop relying on local taxpayers to backfill that amount. But again, this is really just kind of moving forward through the state, and I can imagine this will just be passed and they'll maintain the budget stabilization factor. I want to point out this doesn't change what might happen for next year's appropriated amount. So we could still see a decrease in the budget stabilization factor. We're just not going to see one for the remainder of this school year.
So Nathan, you said there were fewer per pupil, with the formula, it was like fewer students, but more at-risk students?
Right.
Did I hear that right? But then it equaled out to needing less money?
Right, because they originally appropriated it for a certain number of students, and so they,
Get
when
our
they got
counts,
their
right?
number back,
Yeah.
they realized that they'd
They'd
overestimated
overestimated.
it.
But had underestimated the at-risk?
They had underestimated the at-risk, but it didn't equal out. It still was 17 million over.
This is
Okay,
kind of like what
got
we
it.
did with ours last week, or last meeting, but on a state level, right?
Right.
With
Isn't
actual
it
counts.
out of order? Like, shouldn't the School Finance Act be figured out first, and then they make adjustments to the budget stabilization factor?
Yes, but this is just for this school year.
Oh, so
they're
this is
making-
adjusting it.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's adjusting like we did last month or whenever that was.
Right.
Because the counts come out in October and budgets are set in, so you have that gap of your guessing,
But
estimating.
I agree with you, Nathan, in that, like, if we keep doing this, like, the state will never, like, they'll always rely on MLOs and bonds, and, like, we're, like, letting them off the hook. I don't know. I feel like we're supposed to oppose this one. I don't know.
So what is the rationale?
Kind of agree with
Like,
that.
why would someone put this forward? Just to save the state money and use that money somewhere else?
Right. And I do agree with that sentiment.
Yeah.
But Nate, do you think it's passing? It's going, I mean, there's no,
Yeah, the way I saw it, it just passed right through the committee and passed through second and third reading kind of rather quickly, and so they're just moving it on forward. I'm not sure if there's much we can do. Just
Right,
for
I'm
your
not surprised
information.
that
Did we
it's
not
easily
talk about this one?
passing
Did Casby talk about this one? So I think this has been dropped pretty quickly and moved pretty quickly, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it was introduced on the 6th of February, went through Senate appropriations on the 7th, passed through the second reading on the 8th, and then the third reading on the 9th.
That's fast.
So-
It's easy.
Right, the state doesn't want to put as much funding in schools.
CASB has a position of monitor as well.
Okay.
Casby does.
Senate Bill 2399, this is another bill that was introduced by Senator Kirkmeyer. This bill has been referred to the Education Committee. That must have been Appropriations Committee, my apologies. So this increases Tier B funding for students with specific identified disabilities. So we know Tier A funding is for all students with disabilities. We know that number went up. This increases the amount for students with specific identified disabilities. These students typically require more specialized care, and we know that it does cost more to support these students. So this does appropriate an additional $40 million to Tier B funding, which would be around $4,318 per student. I think that this is certainly beneficial and provides more support for these students, and certainly something that I think we should support.
This is $4,318 in addition to the standard per pupil funding
For those Tier B
for
students.
those identified students.
Right.
Do you have any, like,
Do you have a list of this?
what the identifiers are?
For Tier B funding?
Yeah.
Um,
Or could you get that to us later?
I could,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's really for specific kind of specialized care, so,
It's students with significant
Yeah.
disabilities.
but I will get that information to you.
So it's additional funding, and it's not pulling from Tier A to put into Tier B? It's additional?
Yeah, so they're going to appropriate an additional $40 million on top of what they're already providing to Tier A students.
So you kind of need to pass
Both, yeah, 6 and 7.
So 136, so you have $40 million out of that 76 million to move over to the Tier B students, yeah.
And I didn't purposely do that, but I'm just.
But it is, I
explaining
mean, that is kind of how that would work.
Okay, and then this last one, House Bill 22-1202, I just wanted to point out for you all, we know that the at-risk measures was passed in 2022. They had created a working committee, and they presented those findings to the State Board of Education, and ultimately they determined these 2 neighborhood factors are what they're going to add to the at-risk formula, identified student percentage and neighborhood socioeconomic status. These are somewhat complicated formulas where they're taking in certain factors based on neighborhoods, and they're averaging both identified student percentage with neighborhood socioeconomic status, and they will provide additional funding for kind of those neighborhood factors. So we kind of saw this coming, but I just wanted to point that out, and I know I didn't go far into detail about that, so I can provide more information. Did anybody have any other bills that they wanted to discuss, or any other comments?
See, on the at-risk measures, there's no position yet to take, is that?
It's already
done.
It was already
Okay, got
passed,
it.
so this is just regarding the at-risk working group findings.
Cool.
So they're trying to redefine how they
Instead of
define
free and reduced
at-risk.
lunch.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what this is. You got it. I did have a question. Ms. Mash, where was CASB on the 61, the eliminate state assessment, social assessment? Are they monitoring, or?
Is that a Senate bill or a House bill?
Senate bill. 61.
I just sent you all the link to CASB's website with their bill tracker, just
Oh,
so
good.
you can look at that, monitor.
They're on monitoring,
Yeah.
okay. So I want to just recap. We're going to stay monitor on Accountability Act, but we might move towards support depending on what happens there. There's some feeling of support here, I think I heard, right? We want to move the social studies to monitor. Is that what you heard, Nate?
Yeah, I think
Or
the
more
way that I feel is everybody sees the value in social studies, but if you guys are confident that our local testing and data is enough that we can see improvements, or you know, and then we're okay with the state not making us test, because I don't think that anybody wants the state in our business more than they have to be, but we just don't want there to be a lack of implied value on social studies.
That's fair.
Right, so like if you guys, you and your cabinet are saying, hey, here's our stuff, here's our data, we are monitoring, I think
Yeah, it's
we'd be
just-
okay with no state testing on that, because I mean, I don't really,
Is it fair to say this assessment has not been added value for us in terms of our decisions around social studies instruction?
I would say so, and definitely based on the local assessments that we have created, our common assessments, and those being able to be used in formative ways to then drive instruction across the year versus a one-time assessment given at the end of the year that we don't get assessment data back until much later on.
but I guess we have local assessment that we're monitoring and keeping track of, and
And
Right,
it
'cause-
shouldn't
Yeah,
change
let's
yeah.
stay
the
support.
quality.
Yeah, I
of
say
the-
support.
Yeah, but it won't change the quality of the instruction or the value placed on that topic.
And then some of these, we're going to get some more information on, and there'll be stuff in your weekly bulletin on this as well. These and some others. Nate meets weekly with our lobbyist, and then I join them when I can, and we hear kind of what's going on behind the scenes, as well as her updates, and then we make, at that point, we take a position, but then we will always come back to you for your, your support and discussion on that position.
Thank you, Nate.
Thank you.
We
Yeah, thank you.
appreciate it.
It was interesting, you're right. I had a good day.
Thank you, Nate.
We need to move on, though, to...
Do you want to grab dinner and then come back and do calendar, or do you want to push through calendar and then grab dinner?
How long do we anticipate calendar?
Half an hour.
No, it's not half an hour. We're really just doing the one presentation of the calendar that we're proposing to you all tonight, and then, want to give you one last chance to provide any additional feedback or questions that you might have.
Let's push through.
Yeah.
You don't make a decision tonight on the calendar, so I'll go ahead and frame it, Christina, and you can get ready, they're saying push through. So this is not a decision item yet tonight. We are coming before you tonight and before the public with a proposed calendar for next school year. And then that will come back to you at our next school board meeting as a decision item. So if there's really what we want to do in the work session and in business meeting, if there's anything else you would like us to consider within this calendar, or if we're really missing the mark, we want to hear that. So we bring you back the right calendar that you all feel like you can approve next month or next meeting when we come back. What you will see as our proposal is one proposal. We're not bringing you two calendars and asking you to pick one. We're bringing you one proposal and with a caveat. So I'll let Christina talk about the proposal, and then I'll share the other ask that I have of you all.
Sure. So I want to talk just a little bit about kind of the preparation, which a lot of you know because you've been a part of the conversations over the last few months. But we do have an inclusive calendar committee group, and I'll go into a little bit more detail in the presentation later today about who's involved in that. But it does represent our full community to make sure that we really are considering all of the different aspects that are going to impact our community, whether that's families, staff, students, all the folks are represented in the committee and in the feedback that we receive from that. And so really our charge does come from you all. It comes from board policy ICA, and that really says that we need to use our time wisely so that our students are getting the best instruction they can, and that the superintendent can fulfill our educational decree that is listed by Innovation 2030. So that comes from there. And then just a little bit of feedback, or just a little bit of information on the meetings that we have had as a team. You have heard mostly from our Time and Learning Subcommittee, so that is a smaller group that pulled together the 4 different proposals. We do have a larger calendar committee that actually just met the one time this year because a lot of the work had been done already by the Time and Learning Subcommittee. So the calendar committee met in January to finalize actually early February, to finalize the proposal on just the one calendar. So if you're looking at the 4 calendars we talked to you about before, the calendar we're bringing forward to you today to consider for next year is the traditional calendar, is what we had named that. And so I'll show you the full calendar here in just a moment, but as a quick comparison, we really do have a lot of similarities between the calendar from this year and the one we're proposing for next year. That does provide a lot of consistency for our families, for our students, and for our staff. One key point is that it does continue our Monday late start schedule, so there is still time set aside for staff Monday mornings to meet together and prepare together and individually on those Mondays before students begin. Having the summer maintained the same length of time that we've had in the past does allow for our bond construction to continue this year. We do have a lot of construction scheduled, and so if we were to have shortened that summer, that would put a little bit of a pinch on that work. And so this will allow for that to happen. But it does make a slight change in both our October and our April schedules. So we have 2 4-day weekends built into the calendar now, once in the end of October and once in the end of April, to allow for some little bit of relief during those heavy times that we've heard feedback that we would like some additional time. So we did build in 2 4-day weekends. So that is a slight change from the calendar that you saw previously. And then the final change that is slightly different from last year to this year is that we are proposing winter break be the last week in December and the first week in January, rather than the last 2 weeks in December. As calendars shift from year to year and the day kind of moves and shifts from year to year, that would have put us at a Wednesday to Wednesday winter break this year, and rather than do that, we decided to push it back so it's a full 2 weeks with weekends on either end. So that is why we have the last week in December and the first week in January.
Excuse me.
Christmas is on a Monday, right? So you got Saturday and Sunday.
And Friday actually too, yeah.
Friday.
The
And
Friday
that
before.
solves the question you asked me today, Mr. Norwood, about January 2nd.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just some quick highlights on this. Our students do begin school on August 14th. That is a Monday, so our high schoolers would come back that day, and grades 1 through 8 would begin their rolling start. So they would begin those 2 days, the 14th and 15th, And then our kindergartners would do a rolling start on August 17th and 18th. So that would be a Thursday, Friday. We do maintain a week-long Thanksgiving break in this calendar, just like we have in the last couple years. And I did mention winter break is that last week in December and the first week in January. So they're actually starting Friday, December 22nd. Spring break does align with UNC and with Ames, and that is that March 11th through the 15th. And then those 2 mid-semester breaks I mentioned are listed in there as well. The October break is a Friday, Monday 4-day weekend, and the April break is a Thursday, Friday 4-day weekend. And so those 2 days are taken from our CMAS makeup days. As far as staff, we do have our new professionals beginning 4 days before our other teachers come back. So they have New Professionals Academy that starts August 1st. As I mentioned earlier, we'll maintain our late start Mondays for some preparation and planning, professional development, and personal work time for staff members as well. And then this does maintain a pretty well-balanced semester. So first semester would be 83 days, second semester is 87. That does accommodate for those days of testing in April as well. So there's a few extra days in second semester to account for that. Here is a big picture of what that calendar looks like. You'll see starting July, August across the top, and the rows go from left to right. Graduation does happen, the last day of school is just before Memorial Day weekend. Any questions, concerns?
Do you have the October day on that calendar as well?
Yes, so the October long weekend is the October 27th, that Friday, and Monday the 30th. And then in April, you'll see the 25th and 26th for the long weekends in both of those times.
So did either start time or end time change with this calendar and the last?
We did actually bump the start date back by 2 days for students, and that shift is also moved along with that winter break shift to the last week in December. That allowed us to bring our staff back in August rather than having to do a July start for staff.
What is Thursday, December 21st? Is that a school day?
Thursday, December 21st is actually a work day for our staff. So the final day for students would actually be on the 20th.
Okay.
Staff will work the 21st, and then the 22nd is the first day off for everyone for full break.
AKA December 2nd after the 19th.
Yeah.
It's Q2.
Oh,
It's
Q2.
the end of second quarter. Yeah.
I was like, why
0,
is there
2.
not computing?
Yep, it's hard to see, but it's a
yeah,
Q.
Q.
Yep, you'll see our quarter breaks and our trimester breaks are marked up there as well. So like October 6th is the end of quarter one. There, that first Friday in November, you'll see a T1, that's the end of the first trimester. And continued throughout the year. So yeah, it's kind of hard to read there, but it's a Q2.
What are the asterisks in April and May?
Those are our testing
Let's let her
windows.
guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So this is the calendar you're bringing us now.
This is the calendar we're bringing you now for this coming year. And I don't know, Dr. Pilch, would you like to speak more about what we'd like to do for the
Yeah.
following
Thank you.
year?
So what I'm hoping is to have your support in us continuing the Time and Learning Committee and working with the calendar committee to continue to look at this balanced calendar and the extended year calendar, and even, I suppose, the 4-day calendar that we brought you all. But we think that this is a pretty good sweet spot for this next school year. What we know is that if we want to start school a week or two earlier, if we want to take a longer break in October, we need more feedback from our parent community than we've gotten thus far. And we really need to analyze what a schedule like that means to our hourly employees, our employees that are not year-round employees, and our employees that are paid hourly. And so I would like your support in continuing the work and not just sunsetting the work that has already been done, but continuing that work and going deeper to really be certain that keeping a traditional calendar is the best way we want to go here in District 6? Or do we want to try and do something a little more out of the box with extending that school year a bit more? So I'd like your support in that. But really what we're going to be asking you to approve at the next board meeting will be this traditional calendar with any, suggested feedback that you all might have for possible tweaks to this calendar.
I'm wondering about so I really appreciate that, and I appreciate that we are going to get more parent input, community input. I'm wondering about the time, is it time on task, time and learning?
Time and learning.
Time and learning committee, and also the calendar committee. They know that this is what you're bringing to us, and they've worked pretty hard on putting this together, and this is something that they're supporting as well.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. They came up using the consensus process with this calendar, made some of the changes to it with this calendar, and fully support it. There is a lot of excitement around some of the other options that we're considering as well, recognizing that the work really does need to continue to gather more feedback and get more input. They're very comfortable with that, and looking at that for the next year, knowing that the work is not just being dropped, but is just continuing for a little bit longer.
Thank you.
And thanks for considering them.
I think it looks great. I think having Memorial Day still out of school and kick off summer that way, I hear that a lot with parents. And then I hadn't even considered the bond construction previously, so I think that's pretty wise to kind of get that out of our hair before we, that's a big commitment we've made to the community, and that has a lot of ramifications if you mess up those deadlines, in the construction industry. So you guys did a good job listening to us and explaining the whys and whys not. So thank you.
Any other questions, guys, for Ms. Wayne? Agreed. Great job. Thank you. We're to our debrief of the work session. So started with Taylor, so we'll start with Brenda.
Sure. Yeah, I thought that was a great work session. I enjoy hearing everybody's comments and opinions, and thank you to all our presenters who can bring all this information and make it bite-sized for us. So appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks to Nate and Natalie for taking me down to the Capitol and getting to dive deeper on this. Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of how it goes down there, but I'm not a huge fan of any big government, so that wasn't surprising. But there's a lot of value, and then a lot of this stuff will affect us greatly, or could affect us greatly. So it's important, and it's a lot of work on Nate's end to keep all this straight. So thanks, Nate, and yeah, good job on the calendar. I'm excited to get that out of our hair and just permanent, and so people can start making their plans.
Natalie?
Thank you for answering my maybe endless questions. I just have to get things in my brain and where they make sense to me. So thank you for answering those. And sorry if I ever sound like combative or something. I'm excited to have this Council of Student Reps be more involved. And yeah, I actually do enjoy the judicial process. I'm kind of with Kyle. There are some discouraging things to learn about how things go in the Capitol, but that's our job to keep well informed about what affects us, and our advocacy actually really does work. That's what CASB kind of kept talking about. Like, we have our own lobbyists. CASB is a lobbyist, but our legislators want to talk to individuals, and especially board members, because we are peers with them. We were elected by the same people. So if we want to continue to foster our relationships with our legislators, that is really valuable. So,
Rob?
Dr. Fall, you never cease to amaze me. I really appreciate all the information you brought tonight, and your perspective and everybody's perspective as well, too. And thank you to the calendar committee. I think it really looks good. I like that some of the other schools around the area went that extra week into January this year, and they seem to like it, so looks good.
Bill?
Mr. Fall, thank you for actually limiting the number of bills, because I think it was more beneficial that we actually got some communication going and people got to ask questions and whatnot than when we have the presentation on all of them, because it is a little overwhelming. And I did not take offense on the glassing eye over thing, because I know I'm guilty on that one. So if we could continue this format, I do like that because it's more informational, gives us a lot more to think about, and can contribute a little bit more to the conversation on it. So thank you.
Terry?
I would just agree with Taylor. I really appreciated this format. I feel like that's probably one of the most in-depth discussions we've had about bills, and I think it was really helpful that Kyle and Natalie were able to go down to the Capitol and give us their input as well. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. And I also appreciate everyone's support in having the Council of Student Reps join us. I'm excited about that. And of course, Christina, thank you.
If I can say one more, there is one more CASB day at the Capitol. It's February 23rd, and CASB arranges it. There's breakfast, and then you walk to the Capitol. They help you, do the process to pull your legislators out if you'd like to speak with them. They kind of let you know what's going on, and then they do a debrief and kind of will update on the bills. So if anybody else wants to go, I can't go that day, but
it is very interesting to go and participate.
There'll be other times.
Again, thank you guys for going to that, staying involved, and very informative meeting. And so thank you guys for the work, and thanks to our staff for bringing us all that. So we've got just about 25 minutes, and we need to adjourn so that we can eat and get to our next meeting.